Now, to bring in some perspective in regards to this particular finance bill and what it means for the country going forward, is joining us is Leonard Wanyama, an economist. Leonard, thank you for joining us this particular evening.
Thank you very much, Abdi, and great to be with you this evening.
Okay, Leonard, my first question to you will be, what did you make of the legislators' move of rejecting the finance bill?
Thank you, Abdi. I think I'd like to commend Parliament, considering the context in which our economy is, where we are between a rock and a hard place. If you heard the sentiments of the committee chair of the Departmental Committee for Finance and Planning, that is Honorable Gladys Wanga, we are in a situation where we have to balance between cushioning the public from the effects of COVID-19 and also ensuring that we raise taxes and continue the functioning of government and other activities. So indeed, I think from their rejection, I think we of those Treasury proposals, I think the committee did the best as it could. From our participation in this process, I think we realized that they rejected a number of some 3 proposals that we made, accepted 5, and 1 is something we still feel is a contentious matter. So I think it was a very tight balancing act.
Vote. Some are saying, Leonard, that finally the legislators are doing what they are meant to do in that august house, given that many have called the house a conveyor belt. Do you agree?
I think considering that they are very critical to the budget process and in the conversation of raising taxation, it's important to say that they did their best. They listened to the sentiments of Mwananchi through a civil society coalition called Okoa Uchumi, the East African Tax and Governance Network, put in proposals. And we see that they even went as far back as considering issues that we've raised from 3 years ago. So I think indeed they woke up, although quite later than we expected, but I think this time around they've listened to Mwananchi. Nonetheless, we are a bit concerned that there are areas in which they deferred to Treasury and did not look into the powers of the Cabinet Secretary that we are highlighted, that will cause arbitrary tax policy decisions, which might actually lose some revenues in future if not properly implemented.
Sorry for that. In mind, this begs the question, how will Treasury reach its target given that they tabled a 3.6 trillion budget?
Well, in the course of our submissions, we gave alternatives in terms of how Treasury could raise funds, particularly in the space of tax incentives that the Treasury has been giving. For instance, when you look at the powers that we had identified in our submissions concerning how they determine beneficial ownership of countries, these are some of the tax loopholes where if Treasury looks into them quite well, they will be able to raise funds. During the course of our presentation to Parliament, we realized that, for instance, if you look at questions like import declaration fees, there are big chunks of transactions that amount to even 5 billion that when taxed come up to revenues of about 200 million and such. So also if you look at like the railway development levy, when they're thought about properly, you get such huge amounts, 200 million, 300 million, where you can actually be able to then raise taxes without burdening Mwananchi through the expansion of income taxes and the value-added taxes. So those are the kind of alternatives we had provided to Parliament, and we hope that Treasury will be able to onboard this in the law and in their implementation.
Okay, however, Leonard, people are saying that a section of Kenyans, that is, they're fearing that since this finance bill, of course, was rejected in the National Assembly, they fear that this gives a leeway to the National Treasury to go borrow some more, given that already our debt ceiling is rising?
Well, I think the first thing on that front, then Parliament, Treasury need to implement policies where they do no more harm to Mwananchi, but also protect SMEs. So for instance, in that case, if indeed we need to borrow, I think we should immediately begin the process of debt restructuring so that we are not taking the easy money with higher interest rates, for instance, Eurobonds, as opposed to concessional grants, which have a longer period to pay up, so and at lower interest rates. So that's the kind of adjustments that Treasury should look into in order to kind of allow for circulation of money and also making being able to carry out its commitments, so like the pending bills, so that there's that circulation and things get to work in the economy.
Given Leonard, that you are a vast economist, could you tell us also, could Treasury be considering, because there were talks in the National Assembly of even the Treasury coming to ask the National Assembly to raise the debt ceiling, which is currently at 9 trillion. Is that a viable option for the Treasury also?
Well, that's a bit of a dangerous move, but then I think it will be based on the needs and the priorities that are set out. We have to work on policy, as I said. We should do no more harm. And so we have to think through a process where we live by our means. That's why debt restructuring is highly, highly recommended. When you pace payments to go further, as opposed to this situation where you will be raising the debt ceiling so that you're able to borrow more and pay debts as soon as possible or at a much shorter rate. So I think that situation must be properly debated, including other stakeholders, not just Parliament and the Treasury, but even the civil society, the private sector, so that we know how we can live within our means and then think of how we can restructure our debt so that Mwananchi, companies, business entities, and Kenyan entities don't get to suffer in a very short time.
Thank you so much. Give us your final remarks as the country, of course, the financial year is coming to an end in a week or so. What will be your final remarks to our dear viewers who are watching right now? In regard
I would first like to commend my civil society colleagues who kind of got together to put in our submissions. I think it's been a long journey to get Parliament to listen to Mwananchi concerns. I'd also like to take the opportunity to urge our parliamentarians to continue considering this as a moment for them to make the necessary amendments needed so that the law is fair. And as I said, and I reiterate again, we should do no harm to Mwananchi, but we should also protect the small and medium enterprise sector, which provides the most jobs. So I think on that process, we would then be in a channel to ensure that we have fair and equitable tax policy that will get us in the short to medium term, especially in the context of COVID-19.
Wanyama, economist there, of course, expounding on what's to come in the coming days, given that the financial year is set to end in the coming week. Thank you so much, Leonard, and of course, we wish to have you once more, and good evening.